ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, I will be having my notes on me. I will. In fact, I'll put my notes right here, because from now on I will be using notes for pretty much everything, because there's so much information and so much whatever that I'm just going to have to. There are, oh god, the information in ADHD is insane. Oh my days, the amount of work I put into trying to do this. There will be more than one part to this, and the videos will be longer than I expected, but will be worth it. Now, there is a reason I'm doing these. Obviously, I'm raising an autistic, and my niece has just been diagnosed with ADHD. It really is that simple. To bring awareness to these conditions, I think is very important. I think it's really important to bring awareness to these conditions, just purely because there's not enough. There's just not enough awareness about them. I mean, people spend so much time plugging cancer, dementia and Alzheimer's, that conditions like these, they just don't get enough of a look in, as far as I'm concerned. Now, they have the whole mental health days, they have Autism Awareness Week, which is coming up at the end of March. Yay! Now, I still have things that I want to say about autism, which I will say. I do have, which will be put out during Autism Week. But ADHD and ADD are conditions that do not get much of a look in, as far as I'm concerned. And with my niece being diagnosed with it, I think it's time to shed a bit of a light on it. So I did a bit of research on it. I learned a lot, to be fair. And to be fair, there are things in there that I didn't even realise. It helped me to actually understand my niece a little bit better, which was kind of cool, because now I can see not only what my sister goes through and why she has such a hard time with her, but I can see it a little bit from her perspective as well, from my niece's perspective, and how it must feel, being her. It can't be very easy, having this condition. I mean, from what I can tell, you are diagnosed as children as a rule. It's very rare to be diagnosed as an adult. Let's get that straight right now. If you are diagnosed as an adult, you are showing signs as children. It's been scientifically proven that it cannot happen. You cannot actually just get this condition as an adult. It's not something that just appears as an adult. It's been proven that even if diagnosed as an adult, you've shown signs as a child. Okay? But as children, they go through a lot, and it must be really difficult for them, especially for a little while, when they could be classed as naughty children. I mean, how many of you as fully grown adults, gone through like the 80s being classed as naughty children because, they didn't know they had ADHD, or as got into like their 50s and, going back to the 60s and 70s, were classed as naughty children because, there was a possibility, because there was a possibility you could have had a condition like this, but you just didn't know it. Let's find out, shall we? I mean, let's see how many of you could actually relate to this, or something similar to it as adults now, because I look at this and I can see my niece through this, and it makes perfect sense as to why she was diagnosed. And what's really hard is that I can see my nephew in this as well, at least in part, but his dad is ADD. So it doesn't surprise me that I can see my nephew in this as well. I mean, only to a point. I'm going to have a look at ADD next and see the differences and why this feels very similar to my nephew, but not completely similar to my nephew. Because there are parts of this where I look at it and go, yeah, my nephew, and then I look and go, maybe not, don't know, not sure, but yeah, you know, but yeah. How many of you can relate to this growing up? You know, maybe in the 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, and then got to adulthood and realised, you know, there's a possibility, you know, just being told you're a naughty kid all your life. Okay, let's get into this. Right. So, some of the symptoms or the signs that you could be, or ADHD, are things like inattentiveness, which I think is like basic, you know, difficult concentrating, short attention span, and easily distracted. I mean, how many kids are like that anyway? You know, so many. But they make careless mistakes generally in school. I mean, we're talking about kids that are in school, you know. They appear forgetful, or they lose things. Now, again, a lot of these things, they can be classed as things children are a bit like that anyway. But then we get to things like they're unable to focus on things, on tasks that can be time consuming. They don't listen. They can't carry out instructions. They constantly move from one activity to another. So they can't focus on one activity. So they're constantly doing one thing after another. So they start one thing, then move to another, then move to another thing. They just can't stay in one activity. And they can't organise their tasks. Okay? Now they're just the basics of what ADHD is. The basics of what ADHD is. All encompassing. Okay, that's all encompassing of what ADHD actually is. If you look it up, that is what you find. All encompassing of what ADHD is, right? But if you look at the hyperactivity and impulsivity of it all, you get things like they can't sit still. And especially they can't handle really calm, quiet spaces. So if somewhere is really calm, really quiet, they feel the need to move around. They can't handle really calm, quiet places. They just can't sit still. They're constantly fidgeting. They need to be moving. Someone with ADHD is constantly moving around all the time. They can't sit still, you know, in one place, ever. Okay. So they're constantly fidgeting. And even if it's not a calm, quiet place, they constantly fidget. They can't sit in one place, ever. They just don't. They fidget all the time. They can't concentrate on tasks. There is an excessive amount of physical movement. They will it's constant movement. It's excessive movement, and and the talking. They will talk your ear off. Absolutely talk your ear off. They don't shut up. They won't share. It's almost this concept of your child won't share, but they don't wait their turn. They don't know how to wait their turn. They struggle to wait their turn. It's like, you've got to wait your turn now. No. A child with ADHD cannot wait their turn. The brain doesn't know how to sort of wait. So it's like, I want it and I want it now, it's mine. No, you've got to wait your turn. No. They act. They're impulsive. They're absolutely impulsive. They will act without thinking. They just do it. Whatever's going on up here happens. You know those people who like say things without thinking? Someone with ADHD will act. They will just do it. Whatever is going on in their head will just happen. So not only are they talking your ear off, they are doing whatever is that's in their head. So they don't wait for their turn. They will not just stop and think before they act. They will just do it. It's my turn now. I'm going to do this, and I'm just going to go over here and do this now. You know, it's like, well, no, I'm doing that now. You can go back. You know, it's this constant movement and this constant. I don't need to think before I do something. They don't do that. They don't think first. They just keep going. They act. You know, they will interrupt anybody and everybody. They don't know how to. It goes along the same lines of they won't wait. So they will just interrupt people. You know, they just don't wait. They will interrupt you. They will just carry on. And I think the worst thing about it, I think the biggest thing about it is they have either little or no sense of danger. So there's this concept of they don't know how dangerous things are. I mean, when we say there's little or no sense of danger, you're thinking about roads, you're thinking about, you know, peer pressure as they get into teens, you know, things like that. And you're talking about, you know, as they move into their teenage years, they will be prone to peer pressure, and they won't notice if that's dangerous or not. They will be acceptable to or susceptible to anything. You know, if someone says try this, they'll do it. You know, someone says run over that, you know, jump over that bridge, they'll freaking well do it. You know, they are the types of people who, if somebody says jump off that bridge, they would do it. You know, or try this, they would. You know, they are those types of people. And, you know, the problem here with all of these issues is that children with ADHD will have the issue where they will underachieve, or they could underachieve, because their concentration and their listening skills are very, very poor. Problem is also is their social skills are very poor as well, because they interrupt people, because they have no filter. They don't think before they act. You know, their social skills are lower, and so they don't generally. They're not very socially aware, and it's not just amongst their own peers, it could be amongst adults as well. So you take all this, so they're quite isolated in their own little way, and they can be if they're not properly helped. Again, they can have a lot of problems with discipline because of all of these issues. And you can have a lot of problems with discipline. I think my sister, over the years, she's had a lot of issues getting, you know, disciplining her before they knew she was ADHD. And let's be fair, they only found out about it a year ago. You know, she's now 7. Wait, no, about a year and a half ago they found out. So, you know, she was just coming up for 6 when they found out. So she was about 5.5. You know, they were having a lot of problems with things like discipline and trying to get her to behave herself. They thought she was just naughty until they found out, until she went to school. And school picked up on it. And now she's getting the help she needs. You know, it didn't take long to get a proper diagnosis, and now she's getting all the help she needs. You know, see, because schools will help them. working through things like Senkos, the special education teachers, you can actually help children with ADHD. They allow things like the fidget toys, like small fidget toys. You can get ones that go on pens and pencils. You can get what are called wobble cushions. You can put them on like chairs. You can stick them on the floor. So if they're young, like my nieces, you can put it on the floor. It helps them. They're little cushions. They're tiny little. They're round little cushions, and they're raised. They're like raised cushions, and it means that they can sit and wobble like that. So they're in one place. They're not getting up. They're not wandering around. They're sitting in one place, and they're fidgeting. And they could just sit there and do this, and it helps their concentration because they don't get up. They're not constantly trying to wander around. They're not focusing on other things. They're just sitting there, wobbling around. And my sister said they work wonders. They're brilliant for children with ADHD. She said it's really helped her at school, really helped her to sort of concentrate more, and especially with the little tiny fidget toys. She's got an array of different fidget toys that she uses, different types of fidget toys that she uses, including ones that like go on the ends of pens and pencils that she can use at school, that she can fiddle with. She's got an array at school, she's got some at home, and it works. They work with the schools, they work in, as long as they work close together, they can help her. So yeah. It is hard. It is extremely hard. I'm going the wrong way. One thing about people with ADHD is they can get very overwhelmed, very, very easily overwhelmed. They can experience feelings of anxiety, and when that happens, they can get very, very worried. They can also become nauseous, and some to the point where they can have heart palpitations and start feeling dizzy, start sweating. It can get that bad. What they need is a safe space where they can go and chill and be away from people. When that happens, when they start feeling overwhelmed and very kind of scared sometimes, and overwhelmed, worried, scared, doesn't matter how they feel, they need a safe space. At school they will provide one for them, and at home you really should. And it's got to be somewhere different than their bedroom. It needs to be somewhere different than a bedroom. My sister's bought her a cave. It's like a big tent thing. They call it her safe cave. And it's got cushions in there and toys in there, and she goes and sits in there when she feels overwhelmed. But a safe space is what's needed for children with ADHD, just so they can feel safe when they are feeling these overwhelming sense of anxiety, or just completely overwhelmed by the world itself. It is necessary. There are other conditions that people with ADHD feel, other than things like anxiety. They also show something called opposition defiant disorder. Now, I've never heard of that, absolutely never heard of it. It's otherwise known as ODD. It's a really simple way of saying that they feel complete negative and disruptive behaviours. But it's towards people like in authority, like their teachers or even parents. All it is they are negative behaviours towards parents, teachers, or anybody else in authority. That is what ODD is. It's where a child with ADHD, or anybody, anybody who shows negative behaviours towards anybody in authority has the ability to be, could have this oppositional defiant disorder or ODD, and it is literally a negative or disruptive behaviour towards authority figures. And children with ADHD could have this particular disorder. It makes sense actually, because they're trying to control their behaviours, help them. But because they feel like they're being controlled, it does make sense that they would, feel that way towards them. It really would. Everyone's heard of things like conduct disorders. It's just antisocial behaviours. We've all heard of things like antisocial behaviours, violence. One thing about ADHD is it gets a very bad rap, and it is one thing that a lot of teenagers with ADHD have gotten. It's a very bad rap. When teenagers with ADHD start stealing or become criminals, because they are fighting, they start vandalising, harming people or even animals. It is part of it is actually part of ADHD, and there's a condition called conduct disorder, and it is part of the ADHD condition. Not everybody with ADHD has this. I'm going to make that very, very clear. Not everybody who is diagnosed ADHD will have a conduct disorder. Okay? It is not common, but it does happen. Okay? And it is an antisocial behaviour. They can become quite violent, they fight, vandalism, harm. It can happen. It does happen. And it's what gives ADHD such a bad name. And it does. We all know it does. And then, of course, there's like normal things like depression, sleep issues. Now, like autism, it has the same kind of sleep issues that autism has. They are, in that sense, in a lot of senses, they can be very similar, especially with things like depression and sleep issues. And again, a lot of people on the autism spectrum can be ADHD. And epileptic, it has the same, okay, it can go along the same lines. They can both become depressed, they can both suffer with epilepsy. And ADHD and ASD both go hand in hand sometimes. Not all the time, I've got to say that. ADHD and ASD are not common links, but it can happen. But ASD and epilepsy are common links, as well as, but epilepsy is a link with ADHD as well as Tourette's. I didn't know that. I never saw that one coming. The fact that people with ADHD could develop Tourette's syndrome surprised me a little bit. For those that don't know, Tourette's affects your nervous system. It makes you have what's called tics, so body sort of move, like involuntary noises, body movements. But it's not surprising when it comes with dyspraxia. Dyspraxia is fairly common with ADHD because it affects your physical coordination, and that doesn't surprise me, to be fair, because people with ADHD, they don't think before they act. They are constantly on the move. My niece is so clumsy, it's unreal. I mean, extremely clumsy. So it does not surprise me that dyspraxia and ADHD go hand in hand. There's no physical coordination. dyspraxia affects the coordination. So that doesn't surprise me. It did kind of surprise me about the Tourette syndrome, but considering the dyspraxia, it really shouldn't. Yeah. The learning difficulties like dyslexia, however, doesn't surprise me. Considering how they are and the lack of concentration and the inability to perform tasks easily, because they can't concentrate on things very well and they struggle to actually finish tasks. It doesn't surprise me that they suffer with learning difficulties, but there are ways to help them. There are always ways to help them. So yeah, there are definitely ways to help them if you talk to the schools, and you have things in place for them. My niece is definitely doing a lot better since she got the wobble boards and she's allowed to use the fidget toys. She still struggles a lot in school. I'm not saying she's not struggling in school, because she is, but she's doing a lot better with the wobble cushions and the fidget toys. She is managing to focus a lot easier, so it's helping, you know. Yeah, there's just a hell of a lot in this now. I'm going to leave that here because this video is getting rather long. I will do some more of this tomorrow. I'll see you all later.